Hi everyone, welcome back. So now we have entered week 2 of Voyage 14, and this is to pay off a Discover One bill that started off as $4,182, and then we're going to try to pay that off within 7 weeks. And then once again, this is week 2 of that 7 weeks. And then joining us is 2 little starfish for that second week of this voyage. And so how we are plotting out Voyage 14 at the moment, we start off with the amount of 4,182, divide that by the 7 weeks. It is actually due by November 13th. And then what I do is typically send payments on the Friday of each week. And then we have until November 7th to get that paid off before the deadline of November 13th. And then I calculate that the 4,182 divided by that 7 weeks is around $597.43. And then last week on September 26th, I did a full amount of $600, bringing that down to $3,582 due. And then once again on October 3rd, I also sent another $600, and that brought that down to $2,982. So then we'll go ahead and highlight that second week since that has been accomplished. And now $2,982 is the new voyage balance that needs to be paid off by November 7th. And then we'll jump into what the numbers have been up to. So we'll start off with checking account. We began with a payroll check of $1,044.11. And with that amount, we sent $44.11 to savings just to even it out to $1,000. We then applied $30 to line of credit 1, bringing that balance to $970. Line of credit 2 received a payment of $31.25. And then we applied $31.25 also to line of credit 3. I then did a kind of more of a breakdown on the loan 1. And I realized we only needed to do $47.82 a week on that. And I was doing $50 a week, and then we were doing the $8 and change to the savings. So this week I did it a little bit different, where I did that $47.82 to loan 1, and that is, so it'll be paid, let's see, November 1st is the due date on that. So we'll do that each week until November 1st. And then that $2.18, I went ahead and put that into savings. And then I also did where we usually put $50 to savings each week anyway. And what I'm trying to do is just kind of plump up the savings account. And then our checking is now at $807.50. We then have 2 student loan payments that are going to be coming out this week. And I did a roundup where one of them is actually, was at $99.01. So I rounded up to $100 with 99 cents going to savings. And the other is for $63.67, I believe. So then we have 34 cents going to savings, and then 64 is what we took out of the checking account for that student loan payment. And that it's going to happen on the 7th. So I wanted to make sure, since it's an automatic payment, that we were ready for that and the funds were in the account. And then we're left with $643.50. And so that's $643.50. I went ahead and I sent to, I have a backup checking account, and I'm calling this one the Discover Set Aside one. And so now that this checking is at $0, and so then we will go to the Discover Set Aside. So we left off last week being $146.50. We then add the October 3rd payroll of $643.50, giving us $790 in that account. And then we did send $600 payment to Discover One, so that's payment number 2. Then after that $600 came out of the set aside account, we then had $190, and then we used 82 of it for the internet, and that also is on the American Express, so that kind of did a double payment on that one. My pen's not working. There we go. So that was also on American Express. And then I did do some shopping at Target where I got some household items, toiletries and such for $22.80. So I went ahead and we're paying off Target in full each month every time we use it. So that's where that $22.80 came from. So now in that Discover Set Aside account, it's $85.20. And basically what I'm trying to do is see if I can't get that loan paid off faster. But at the same time, I want to keep reserves on the safe side and just trying to send $600 a week and keep the rest in reserves to help pay other bills. And that way we're not dependent on the credit cards to make the payments. And also I am working really hard now on where if I do have a payment that is the credit card is used for, that I go ahead and pay that credit card right away too on that one. So that's exactly what I did on the internet bill with the American Express, where that comes out the first of the month. So we went ahead and got that taken care of. And then we had quite a bit of activity in the savings account, so I didn't do a breakdown of what the balance was after each item. But we start off with $1,328.43. This account did receive 13 cents of interest. And then we had that 71 cents of roundup for, I believe it was last week's bill that we paid. And then we had the odd amount from the payroll check to bring it to $1,000 of that, where we put that $44.11 into the savings. And then we had that loan extra when we found out we don't need the full 50, we just need to have $47 and change. So the $218 went to savings. And then we did the regular savings weekly deposit of $50. And then we had two other items. I think this was the student loans combined was $1.33 is the roundup amount. And then I think I had 7 cents in another account that was interest, so I went ahead and sent it to the savings, or it was a roundup event. So after all these items were added into savings for this week, we now come out with a balance of $1,426.96 in that savings account. And then we go ahead and look at what happened with loan number 1. So we start off with October 3rd. The payment is due on November 1st. So we're making a payment each week as part of that. And that also keeps the interest where we're able to cut it down a little bit too by making the weekly payments on this loan. So we're starting off with $8,510.91. And so this week we sent that $47.82. Of that amount, there was $8.98 that went to interest. And then $38.84 went to principal. And so what I did was I went ahead and I put like last week's, that way we have a comparison where the interest went down by 3 cents for that week. And then the principal went down by a bunch, but then it was a different payment too. So I guess that's not an actual comparison, where next week will be a better comparison when we do the $47.82, because last week we did $41.28 to finish up the loan. This week we did $47.82, and I think we're gonna stick with that $47.82 and then do the other $218 to savings, kind of cushion up the savings a little bit. And then we look at the line of credit threes, and we start off with line of credit 1 being $11,852.40. We currently have $147.60 available in that line, and we did a weekly payment of $30. And on November 1st, we have a payment of $118.65 due. So looking at, and then we typically have this set aside for bills, but right now in this Voyage, we're just putting monthly, no, not monthly, but weekly payments towards it, and just kind of get this balance down. So it's, eventually I want to kind of just get down to just using only one line, and I think that's kind of what's going on. Is there's too many lines going on, so I'm trying to redo stuff and see what my cash flow is at naturally too. And then the line of credit 2, we typically use that for the Voyage. And then this week we're at $12,379.26. We do have $120.74 available, and that weekly payment is $31.25 that we sent to that. And that has a monthly payment due on November 1st for $123.94. And then the line of credit 3 is for the mortgage, and that is at $12,186.02. Available now is $313.98. we did send $31.25 for a weekly payment on that. And then due on November 1st is $114.39. So all three of those combined, the balance on the lines is $36,417.68. Total available is $582.32. And then for the week we sent $92.50. And then the monthly payment on all three combined is $356.98. And then we just did a breakdown on the line of credit 1, where we start off with that $11,865.33. We did have a payment automatic of $118.65 that we actually returned to the account it came out of, and that was just to keep iBooks. It was a weekly thing. And so with that $118.65, there was $12.19 that went to interest, $106.46 went to principal, and then when we did that $30 weekly, there was $4.88 that went to interest, and then $25.12 went to principal, and then that gave us that $147.60 that's available. And then also on the line of credit too, we also had where it had an automatic payment of $123.94 that occurred. We also did returned it to the account that came from, and there was $11.44 that went to interest, $112.50 went to principal, and then when we got to our $31.25, we had $4.58 of interest and then $26.67 of principal. So currently available is $120.74. And then we look at line of credit 3. And that also had a payment of $114.39 that went towards it. And then we also went ahead and returned that item to the account it came from. So we essentially just reimbursed the account that it came from. And that was for $114.39. There was $11.75 that went to interest. The $102.64 went to principal. And then we added $114.39 because we did that payment return. And then we also did a mortgage payment, so we took the mortgage payment out of this line, and then we applied that $31.25 for the week, and that was $5.02 of interest, and then $26.23 of principal. And then currently there's $313.98 that's available in that line of credit 3. And then this is just the usual captain's log that we have from Voyage 1 to Voyage 13C. And then on this one we have $64,295 as what had been paid off for the voyage amounts. And then when you add in Voyage 14, I went ahead and I put that $64,295. Adding $600 from week 1 and week 2 into that gives us $65,495. Then once again, Voyage 14 started off with $4,182. Week 1, we sent them $600. That brought it down to $3,582. And week 2 also received $600 for $2,982 is what's currently owed on that. And then we look at the credits available, where we did do a payment to Visa, and we did have $90.08 that went to interest on that one. And then we currently have $352.71 available, so we want to get that paid down. So, and I'm also, like I said, thinking about phasing that one off and probably sending weekly payments of $50 to that one too, just like I'm doing that lines of credit, just to get some more cushion in those accounts. And then the city is at 18,000 is the limit, where the balance is currently 5,800. So we do have 12,200 available in that line. And then Discover one that we're working on, we have a limit of 22,000. And then after we sent that 600, the balance went down to 6,622, because there's actually 2 balance transfers on there, and we're getting one paid off, and then there'll be another one after that. So available on that Discover one is now 15,378. So with all 3 of these credits combined, we have available as 50,000. We're currently using $22,069.29. And then available is $27,930.71. And then, like I was saying, I think with my thought process is we're going to just basically just phase out the credit cards eventually, and then we'll just have one line of credit only. So, and that's going to be a little bit of a process. Each week we're getting closer to getting that accomplished. So then we look into the monthly bills that have occurred so far. We have the internet for $82, and the American Express is what the item used to actually pay the internet bill, and then we sent $82 from that set aside checking of Discover One to pay that monthly bill. And then we also sent $600 to that Discover One, also from that set aside checking account. And then we get into the monthly loans. On the mortgage, we had something kind of interesting happen where somehow we got more money applied to the loan. So I had a different balance for a while, and then I realized there was extra payments applied that they took them off. They backtracked them and said it was a misapplied payment. So now we are at $47,646.61 is what we started off with, and then we did $138.97 interest, $177.16 principal, and then as far as I know, the $47,468.94 should be the accurate balance. And then we did do $445.71 to escrow, and then loan one for the month of October, since it's due on the 1st, it started off at $8,665.89. We did pay $36.30 of interest, and principal was $154.98. So then we started October with the balance being $8,510.91. And then another thing going on this week is I got a letter about the escrow being short $257.67. And so what I'm thinking to accomplish that is basically, if I do nothing, then the payment would go from $761.84, and this is for the loan and the escrow, and it would bump up to $803.13, which is a difference of $41.29. Or I can just go ahead and send them that shortage of that $257.67, and then the payment would stay at that $761.84. So what I'm thinking about doing is taking the escrow out of savings account, and then basically just rounding it up to $260 as what I would pay back to my savings, and kind of give a little bit of a savings boost. Also take care of that escrow shortage at the same time, and just essentially just do a tiny little loan out of my savings account, and then keep track of it to make sure I get the funds put back in. And then that little difference would be just kind of to give myself a little bit of interest and a little bit of extra for that account. So let me know what you think about that, and how do you handle your escrow shortages? Do you just go ahead and accept the new balance, or do you go ahead and pay off that shortage so you can keep the old payment? And so also, if you've made it this far in the video, the code word is CAT. So please like and subscribe to follow my debt journey. Any questions or comments are welcome. And I will talk to you in the next video. Thank you for joining me. Bye.